I think when I joined in, it was ending. I was like, wow, I saw it.
So wait, when you join in, there are people there?
Uh, it was like it said the meeting was like on, and then I think my connection had kind of like dropped out, so I got right back in. It was over. I was like a minute later, it was over. It's like, wow.
Mm. So, okay, so the thing is, so this morning, I went to the Temple Mount, right, which is like a very controversial thing here in Israel. But the thing is, the reason why I go to the Temple Mount is because it's just an enormous, impactful amount of light, right? And and it affects you, it affects you, and humbles you, because it's like wow, and like when you go up there, you think about like the calling God though, his like house was up there. You know what I mean? He's like
Really?
waking, he was waking up on that. I was like, man, that's intense in itself. But like people realize those levels are intense, man. Like people, I want to bask in God's light. Really, you know what I mean? Like I think that's a heavy lift. But anyways, but the one of the things that when I go up to the Temple Mount and I have those experiences, but there's certain places obviously we don't go, places we do go. There's certain preparations like going to the mikvah, different things like this that we do. Right, so we walk on the outskirts. So we're not like in the place where the Kodashim would be at, right? But we're on the outskirts, and that in itself is very powerful. But the point is to say that when I analyze the situation, or when we analyze the situation, we really have to think about like what is my next level? What is the next level? Because it's like it's not enough to just, you know, have the Seder of Kedusha. We also have to have the Seder of Gashmias, right? And the thing is, but using the power of Pesach to liberate me out of one mode of being into another mode of being, right? In that mode of being that I'm at versus the one that I'm going to, right? That dynamic is what the power of Pesach does for me. That is the exodus of Egypt, right? I have my own personal, situation. I have my own personal Egypt, right? Meaning I'm in a place of limitation and my full greatness is not manifest. That place is Egypt, right? And so from that standpoint, it's like, okay, so this is where I'm starting at, and this is where I need to go. But we have to have that clear in our mind. We have to control companies. That's the level, right? How do we get there? That's what we're going to ask Hashem to show that. But the thing is that there's businesses, right? Right. I'm in the spiritual world, right? So it's only so much I can do. You know what I mean? But if I'm in the physical world and I'm doing that dynamic, bro, I have to go and take businesses. I have to either create or figure out a way to, take control of a company, a business, right, and direct it to prosperity and do great things. But the point is just saying, well, I don't see myself that way right now. I see myself the way that I am. That's the exodus, right? Okay, I'm at this place, but I need to go over here. I need to go to this place. I need to go to the place of business owner. I need to go to the place of CEO. I need to go to the place of president. I need to guide an infrastructure. I need to be responsible for employees. That's what we're going to. We don't have time to negotiate. We don't have time to work our way up. You know what I'm saying? All these things that they try to create for us. So that's the idea, right? And so when we say these things and we talk about these things, we have to have a direction. I need to get to this place, right? Like I need to have children, right? I don't have children, right? So I have to get to that place. We got to get there. We got to get there, right? And so everybody has that thing, right? And even your skills, different skills we have in Torah, we got to improve. We have to go from this place to this other place. Exodus, right? And so all these thoughts of all these different leaving different aspects of Egypt, like in our life, we're going to have in the mind at the Seder, but not just in the Seders. Now, that same energy, I was thinking about it. Like when you think about the contrast between the Seder that we're thinking about right now, right? We're thinking about the Seder of of leaving Egypt, leaving slavery, leaving this whole thing, a whole sugya, right? A whole new beginning, a whole new chapter, a whole new parsha of life, just a whole new existence for human beings, right? The whole new thought, like, wow, this could happen. People could leave slavery and be free people and anointed by God, right? And so that dynamic is that's it, right? Right? That's it. And so we have to use this whole process like as a vehicle, right, to move us from one place to another place. All right. So I want to continue on with the conversation of Rob Burke, right? And the reason why I was thinking about it, I was just like, God, Rob's language is so current. Like on certain levels, when you listen to the Rob Burke's language, it's like his language is he went a step past Rabbi Nachman in that way, right? I mean, Rabbi Nachman did other things. He wrote Likutei Moran, these types of things, but it was a different era. It was hundreds of years ago. But I'm just saying, in terms of like when most people, when they think about Torah language that the newer generation could connect to, a lot of people say Rabbi Nachman. Because he talks about things, and I think he even addresses things like mental health and things like this. So Rob is kind of like that, and he's coming more from like a Litvish, Hasidish, Mikubal type perspective, right? And the thing about it, the reason why it's important to critique it, because like, I mean, this really was so impactful in my life. This is like how, I mean, this is 2003. I started there, right? And this is the information I was hearing. I was like, wow, wow, wow. And now I'm here, you know what I mean? So you have to go back on your journey, right? And you have to go and reanalyze all these different things and the influences and what they are and how relative they are to how you see things now, right? But we got to do that in all things in our life. Right? We have to see like right now, I'm chosen for greatness. And what is this greatness? Greatness beyond my imagination. Right? So what does that mean? Greatness beyond my imagination? Greatness beyond my imagination is accepting the greatness that's currently happening. The fact that we're here talking about Torah, the fact that we're aware of the energies and how the universe is changing right now, the fact that we're learning from Siddiqim, the fact that our soul is being elevated, the fact that we're exalted, the fact that we're blessed under God, that we're keeping His commandments, we're loving Hashem without compulsion. So that is the process of greatness. Because if that's not it, then it becomes secular, right? Then it's like, oh well, you know what? Greatness is when Puffy and Jay and Ye, they all take a picture together, and they like, yeah, we the moguls. Man, that's greatness. See, that's the lie. That's the lie.
Yo, black excellence, yo.
They be like, What you got a piece on that? You got a piece
That,
on
you know what I'm
that?
saying? That's the black excellence.
That's what I'm saying. They were riding hard on it.
Hmm.
They were riding hard on it. Like the liberals were loving it, you know. And so it's just like, so it's just like, so that's the thing. It's like that's greatness. That's like, you know, you've exchanged goods and services, and you did it at an opportune time, and you were able to negotiate certain margins, and it was, you know, a trend, and you made a bunch of, okay, and then you bought, you know, bought some real estate, boom boom, you refinance, you know, hey, you know. So it's just saying that, like, that's greatness. By the other nations, that's greatness. It was like, hey man, he got elected to office, man. Man, millions of people voted for him, man. So it's just saying that, like, so that's the world that we live in, and it's a construct, right? That, like, people really thought that out. Like the reward system in our society perpetuates people working night and day, right? And then also wanting to live and perceive themselves a certain way, so they acquire because their whole self esteem is based on a presentation. People, they thought this out. The same stuff that we're studying, other people studying it too. They know about it, but like other types of ways of understanding it. Obviously, they don't know Rav Ashlag Dafka, but the ideas of how the human being works and how they function, the whole thing. Yeah, these people know this stuff, and they're creating on it. No, and it's not in school. No, it's not in school. They told you going to Harvard, you're educated. They told you that. They gave you classes. They made it hard to get into it. You know, it's like the diamond thing, right? It's only a limited amount, right? One company controls all of them. One, two, three, whatever. But the point is just saying, like, it's just saying, like, that's the whole thing. It's just like it's massive. Like we have to start, and that's one of the beauties of, like, you know, going to another part of the world and just chilling for a minute, because it's like you kind of see people living differently, right? And you kind of like, well, what makes them live this way? That's your critique. Because you're like, hey, why aren't you living like me? Right? Why aren't you living like Americans? We're the most powerful country in the world, right? And so you're looking at them, but then you should realize, like, okay, well, this is why they live this way. And then you look at yourself and like, wait, this is why we live this way. You have to apply the same critique to your society. And you look at it and you're just like, man, this is crazy. Not that you're against it. I'm not against it. I'm not against it. There's advantages there in a society that, you know, there's ability to contribute innovation to a marketplace, and to be able to contextualize it and have protective shields there that protect that transaction, right? In terms of the legal judicial system type of thing, right? So there's a lot of benefits to it. But what I'm saying is that as a Jew, I have to have in mind my neshama and my soul, and the fact that I have a certain amount of time in this lifetime to correct my soul. And God's going to provide me the pages of the Torah that I need to learn, right? Which are the different experiences in my life. Those are the pages of Torah that I need to learn, because every experience that we have is connected to a page in the Torah. Heartbreak, loss, forgiveness, happiness, joy, simcha. All right, so yeah, so I want to continue on that. Now the thing is, I let the Rob speak for himself. He's going to just say some points, but we're there. And the thing is like somebody, you know, who's like listening, whatever. It's like, you know, the things like this. I'm sharing with my students my journey to the person I am right now, right? So I'm able to take people through the different experiences of my life and different people of my life, and learn. So we learn Musa, right? So I learned that in yeshiva. We learned, you know, different things, you know, of Torah Baal Peh. You know, we learn things from Bayit Sod. You know, we learn from Rabbi Pinchas, and also Chief Rabbi Pinchas, you know, and from his masters, you know, from him from his masters, he taught us, right? So it's just saying to us a lot of influences that made me who I am. So I mean, people, you know, whatever, they judge the Torah, right? In blessed memory. Any points you want to jump on that?
No, I'm with it.
Yeah. Mhm. Okay.
Just quickly, you're saying there's a Patriot tour for everything. It's amazing how, you know, and I can just speak personally. Anytime that I'm having whatever's going on in my life, no matter what it is, if it's joy, if it's sadness, whatever, when I open up the Torah, no matter, like yesterday, I opened up, I was like, let's just go over Lord Jonathan Sacks,
Two column system.
I went to portion to Parashat Zav. Like we haven't got there yet. But I was like, let me just look at it a little bit. Everything they was saying was exactly where I was at in that particular moment. I
Mm.
mean, everything. And I'm just like, wow. And it's a consistent thing. If I just open up, to Hillim, wherever I want to open up, that's exactly what I need in that moment. So it's like, Hashem is constantly guiding us, constantly giving us exactly what we need. You just gotta open your eyes to it and cry out to him. From wherever place you are, that's exactly the place you need to be at.
Amen, amen. All right, so we'll listen to a little bit. We see where we go. It's a flow. It's a flow vibe, and I also want to probably learn this week's Torah portion. I wasn't able to do. I usually give a Torah portion class to a group in India, but I wasn't able to do it this week for different reasons. But so I, I will. All right. Anyways, all right. So should we? Okay. Yeah. So we'll go.
For a three column system. It's not so much the fact don't eat the chazir. But understand, the chazir is only as the dugmat, the example, the illustration, so we can have a closer and maybe a deeper penetration into the 99 and 9/10%. That's what the cosmic code of the Torah is all about. What's that? Yes.
How does Mars affect, cause spring? What's the relationship to spring?
Why do we need that solar? Why do we need that? Because there is a power called Av Yud Bet. I didn't want, I can't, I want to get into some of the, some of the actual physical expressions, but Aviv in Hebrew, and we must always resort to the Hebrew because ultimately all nations of the world are going to go back to the day before Migdal Babel, right? Oh, everybody. See, there were new Jews, non-Jews, and all that. They all spoke Hebrew. It was only after the Tower of Babel that the 70 languages came into existence. Everyone's going to go back to that, and that's the connection, the alphabet. So, anyone listening to this tape will ultimately have to understand there is no getting away from it. You've got to know Hebrew, because that's the way to make the real connection. So the word Aviv is again a cosmic, concealed description of some thought, energy, intelligence called Av Yud Bet. Av Yud Bet. Now, how many months are there? There are 12, and I don't want to go into. We also know why, and why does everything rotate the way it rotates? We're not here to learn astronomy. We're here to learn the astrology of astronomy, the why of astronomy, not to learn what is, but what caused the astronomical events that occur to occur as they do occur. Anyway, this is the first month. That's what Aviv means. Av Yud Bet. It's the beginning. Spring is the beginning. Why is it called the beginning? Rosh Chodesh Hazeh. Chodesh Hazeh Lachem. Rosh HaChodesh Hazeh. HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem. It'll be the first one. Why? Because this was the first demonstration of a nation, not only Avram, Yisrael, but a whole nation, that for the first time understood the principle and effected the principle of the three column system. Restriction. Before that, there was no such animal. Therefore, they put the blood on the door in the two columns and the doorpost. Three columns that you know from the Kabbalah connection. Three columns. First time. that changes took place in the cassette. And we said the only way you can change cassettes is that this is the month that you change the cassette. Rosh Hashanah has another meaning entirely. But changing the lifestyle, you see, Rosh Hashanah determines whether they're giving you another chance. Whether the soul remains in that body, or that body is too difficult for the soul, and so they say, well, time to leave, you'll come back with another body. Maybe this time you'll come back as a guy, you see. If you come back as a guy, then your desire to receive will never be that strong. So, you can't handle all of it at one time. You can't be, Israeli. So they tell you to come back as a guy first, again, and then that makes it a little easier, because the guy doesn't have that desire to receive, you see, so it's a lot easier. So some of us, but that's determined on Rosh Hashanah. But the lifestyle, your cassette that you choose, one time. Now, that's what Pesach is really about. Can you imagine everybody celebrating Pesach understood the concept that you'll straighten out your whole year this month. This is time to do it. Or you could straighten it out during the year, too. There are many other events that can change, but you know what happens? The geneticist says it's a lot easier for me to change things with the fetus in the womb than once the child is born. If I can only get the Keti, you see, this is the connection with why it had to be before the Makot Bechorot. They were learning how to perform surgery, you see, at the root. Then they could handle Makot Bechorot, that cosmic event. Or not, they couldn't handle it. The cosmic event of Makot Bechorot, that was the elimination of the root of the desire to receive in that frame of reference. But before that, they couldn't handle it. How were they going to execute that? They did it. How did they do it? Oh, but the angel of death did it. Angel of death passed over. That's the significance. We even call it Passover. Pesach. Why do we call it that? That was a significant thing. I thought going out of Egypt was significant. And yet, the whole holiday doesn't even evolve around the family getting together on Pesach, because this is all Pesach is about for 99, maybe 95% of Jews today. This is the family time of family reunion, as if we should never get together all year, but certainly on this day. This is what it's all about. And yet, Pesach is called Pesach for this passing over. Why don't you call it the holiday of the darkness that prevailed over? I mean, there are many other things. Passover. It's not even called the holiday of the slaying of the firstborn. Not even called that. What is it called? The passing over. Why is it called that name? Besides, the Adi gives many other names. But what he says are merely the Pesach, the word, Pesach, the mouth should speak a lot, and that's why we have the Agadah, to do a lot of talking, which we'll get into the next session. But that's only the effect, because the 3-column system established a new order, new cassettes. Where? Aviv Yud Bet, the father, the father. It is the father, father of invention. It's the beginning. That's right, the 12 months. What's that?
It's 3 also. Av, it's Aleph, and Bet is 3, which means 3-column system.
Okay, nice. That's why it's called father. It's the only way you're at the beginning. You remember what we were studying in 10 Luminous Emanations? There's only one place we fit in that we do something innovative. Where is that? In the sea. And what is the action of this innovation? What? Restriction. Establishing the 3-column system. We're so convinced we'll all walk out of thinking that's the only thing we're going to be doing from now. But if you do think that way, at least we'll think about it. If you don't even know about it, then Pesach came and passed us right over. Right over. That's the significance of the holiday. It passes us right over. All right. So this is the significance of what this is all about. Now, how the cosmos got together, I don't know if we'll have enough time to study all of it. No. I'm talking about before I get into the details, there are two parts now. We're discussing now what? The hardware. See, we're discussing the hard disk. The software, the programming, that's the Haggadah and all the things involved with the Haggadah. You see, that's your software. And you have to also, a good programmer, you can have the same hard disk, but not pull out everything from the hard disk, right? You need a good programmer. So, we have the Ari, and he did a pretty good job for us. And we will establish also our software. But, what's the good of software without the hardware? So we have to begin first with the hardware, and that's what we're discussing today. The hardware. By knowing what the hardware is about, you know, first of all, what the software wants to do. But, I want a program about how to create a payroll, but the hardware deals with how to create a spacecraft. This is great. You've got hardware, sophisticated, but your program is tuned into how to cook. Yeah, it's got to, the software has to be reconcilable and commensurate and have an affinity with this hardware. Right? So we're discussing the hardware. And we're establishing the hardware by knowing the hardware. This is what the Jew did at that time. So the reason why the Jewish calendar is solar lunar, so as to keep this, I don't like to use the word historic, but maybe some want that word, so we're using it. Historic event called freeing oneself from bondage. How do you extricate yourself? How do you get out?
Break the chains.
How do you do that? How do you break those chains? This is the time. But it couldn't be done without the power of Av Yud Bet, without our being in control. You can have, you see that the trees were created at the time of creation, the 6 days of creation, they were created that in this time, the force of Aviv, the force of freedom, the force of the Av Yud Bet, the 3-column system, was an inbuilt infrastructure of everything that existed, except for one species, man. It was not an inbuilt. It was not part of the structure of the human being. When did he establish it? When? Now. Why did he establish it now? Because there is that cosmic effect of Aviv that springs things forth. Why does the budding take place now? That power to get you out of the doldrums, to get you out of the old cassette, is only now. You have an opportunity to get out. Unless things are great, so you don't want to get out. But I guess everybody would like to see improvement to whatever extent. Let's get out. That power called Aviv is now. So that's why Taleh and Madim, those two evil forces, channels for the evil force, if we want to do Pesach any other month, never happened. Because we needed the power of Aviv. Now we want the spring so it could be nice. That's right. That was the time.
In the southern part of the globe, it's not Aviv.
That's right. It's a problem, brother. But then again, I have the answer. It was discussed that people who come from the lower part of the globe, lower part of the equator, I have found, it's all about Jews. I have found those Jews to be kinder, not be as, like real Israelis, How come? And so my only answer is that it simply would not have been fair to have the same situation that exists in the north. Now, what is the north? We know north is din. The south is chesed. Without getting into it. That's why these people from South America, a different breed. Different breed. Maybe we want to send all the Israelis to the southern part of that.
Maybe the Zionist movement, they were looking to open places.
That's right, in South America. Always below the equator. Always below that. Maybe we should have began that way. Might have been better off. Okay. In any event, what you said about those people living, in the southern part of the hemisphere, it would have been unfair. So they have it's almost similar like the plants. They get this automatic budding. They're a lot freer, and things are different. For Jews living in the southern part of the hemisphere, they don't go through the same traumas, by the way. Only governments interfere with them, but in their day-to-day life, most Jews are very content. I mean, things are not as the disruption that occurs in the northern part. That's only because it's chesed. Okay, I don't want to dwell on that. But in any event,
that's closer to the impact.
That's right. So, here, we're closer to the din, closer to the impact. And the only time you get closest to the impact is when the opportunity is there for blood. Right? Right. So, the reason that Aries and Mars had to come in conjunction because the Jews could never get out. If it was a wandering kind of holiday calendar that we used, we would have Pesach sometimes in the summertime, sometimes in the wintertime. We could never connect. We could never take the opportunity of Mars and Aries together with spring. We wouldn't have all of the tools necessary to create this freedom. Therefore, they created the extra month. Therefore, the Jews went out. Not we celebrate the holiday because the Jews went out. Who's interested? We're not interested that they left. And the truth of the matter is, I discussed that even in the... Look at yourself as if you just got out. Come on, how many of us could truthfully say ever in our lifetime did we perceive ourselves as being slaves? Unless someone can go back in regression to and say, oh, I feel I was there. They're told, experience. How do you experience? Tell the rich man experience. Now you haven't got what to eat tomorrow. Tell it to him. Okay, I'm going to try my best. Right? But he smells the aroma in the kitchen. How? It's impossible. That's not the purpose. We're not here to celebrate the freedom. What we are here to celebrate, if we can use that word, is we want to tap that cosmic event. Because today, maybe I'm not capable on my own of breaking the bonds that keep me in prison. Maybe I'm not. But if I can connect to that event, if I can connect and be part of that event, that's what the Haggadah means. Not that I have to picture myself as a slave, because we're all slaves to some extent. But if you want to get a new cassette inserted, so I want to connect to the event. That's what I need the software for, okay? But first I must know what the hardware is about, which is what we discussed today. I want to know what the hardware is about. We kind of more or less know what the hardware is now. We know why the hardware exists. We know the components of the hardware. And we know also that the nation of Israel, as a nation, because if it was not a nation, it would only have been Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, we couldn't do the same thing. We couldn't get out. But because the totality of Israel, now the totality of Israel does not mean they were Jews. What does that mean, they were Jews? Meaning the collection of the greatest desire to receive had to be matched against the greatest desire to receive of negativity, which the Egyptians tapped. And that's the way they control the world, says the Adi. How do they control the world? By the force of the desire to receive, meaning, without getting into details, but desire to receive causes what? A constriction of, or a break in the circular vessels where time, space, and motion is one, but rather creates linear time. In other words, what does desire to receive say? I see only me. What does that say? I don't see anything else. All I observe is what? This point. It's a point now. Meaning I know there's other people around, but I'm not concerned about the other people. There are other things going around. I'm not concerned about that. It's the paradox of the desire to receive. That
Sorry about that. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, go ahead. Sorry about that.
So good.
Anyway, so thoughts and reflections on it?
Yeah, it's powerful, especially the timing, the cosmic timing, why things need to be when they are. It's also interesting to me, like with, Avraham Avinu was taken outside, taken outside of cosmos. I always think, because you're taken outside, you're not affected. But I think reality gives you the opportunity to control,
Yeah.
your reality. Instead of it being oh, okay, you have no effect. This doesn't, you're over here and this is over there. It's like, no, now you have the ability, you're above it. You have
Mm-hmm.
the ability to control. You have the ability to manipulate for the better, to control your own destiny, to create your destiny, to create your dream. So, yeah, Rob Berg is on wow. Like I've listened to Rob Berg, but I don't think I've listened to full Shears before.
Mm.
And it's wow. So I definitely something I'm gonna add to, my daily thing now.
Yeah.
A few words, a few minutes here and there, even.
No. I mean, it's just the thing is just it's just the idea is that that's a person who went through the process, right?
Mm,
And this is what he came with, and then people like myself, met him, and different people like that, and like you said, like Rob Zion Lex, and you learned from him, and so. Hold on, I'm just trying to find this parsha. All right. All right, so I want to continue on with the series, and I want to focus on the leadership series, right? And the idea of being able to read certain things in the parsha, which is like right now. Right now, we're in the it's interesting the parsha itself, right? Have you started learning the parsha this week or no?
yeah.
All right. All right. So the idea is like this: is to be able to kind of like learn the parsha and to be like in the mindset where you are um, thinking it out and saying to yourself, "Well, like, how do some of these ideas connect to what's going on right now?" Right? Because we have to realize, like, right now when we're seeing the spring, when they say, "Okay, Abib Spring," we're seeing that right now the alignment in the cosmos, right? The alignment in the cosmos that that exists right now is giving the energy influence where things are able to grow, things are able to sprout out, right? So when they're saying that this is what's going on right now, that means that this is based off of alignment. The Torah itself is on the same system, right? When they describe the U.S. military, they talk about how the naval and the Air Force work in conjunction together, right? The thing that's above and the thing that's below, right? And so the idea is to say that the weekly Torah portion is connected to the seasons in the same way. And so those weekly Torah portions are explaining, in essence, what's going on in the heavens that's creating this influence on earth. Right? So when we read the Torah portion, we want to read it as a frame of, okay, well, this same portion is read almost every year around this time. Right? So that means that that alignment, right, that causes this influence in the world, this is the Torah portion that is read. The holidays or whatever event that's happening or non-event that's happening is reflective of something inside of the Torah. Right? That the month of Tishri has a certain significance, the seventh month, right? The same thing, the following month, which is Cheshvan, there's no holidays. But things like the Mabul happen then, right? Like meaning the flood. So if we could see that the flood happened during this month, we could see that there's something about this time of year where that type of energy is stronger, as with a month prior, it wasn't. We had Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur as a time of forgiveness, right? So the point is just saying, so when we're reading these Torah portions, is to kind of have these concepts in mind. All right, hold on. All right. Okay, Tzav, right? All right. So, okay, so he titles it again. We're with Rabbi Jonathan Sachs and blessed memory, as well as something great Gedolim to learn from. We're beyond lucky. He says on not trying to be what you're not. He said great leaders know their limits. They do not try to do it all themselves. He says they build teams. They create space for people who are strong who are strong where they are weak. He says they understand the importance of checks and balances and separation of power. And they surround themselves with people who are different from them. He says they understand the dangers of concentrating all powers in a single individual. But learning your limits, knowing there are things you cannot do, even things you cannot be, can be a painful experience. Sometimes it involves an emotional crisis. He says the Torah contains four fascinating amounts of such moments. He says they are linked not by words but by music. From 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 quiet early on in Jewish history, the Torah was sung, not just read. Moses, at the end of his life, calls the Torah a song. He says different traditions grew. He says he said different traditions grew up in Israel and Babylon, and from around the 10th century onward. The chant began to systematize in the form of music uh, notations known as Temi, Hamikra, and consolation signs devised by the the um, the Tiberian the Tiberian Masoret. He says guardians of Judaism scarce texts. He says one very rare note known as a shalashit chain appears in the Torah four times only. He says each time it is a sign of existential crisis. He says the three instances are in Genesis, the fourth in Parshat Sav. We all, he says, as we all see, the fourth is about leadership. In a broad sense, there are three. The other three are as well. He says the first instance occurs in the story of Lot. Lot had separated from his uncle Abraham and settled in Sodom. He says there he had a simulate he had to simulate into the local population. His daughter had married a local man. He himself sat at the city gate, a sign that he had been made a judge. He says he says then two visitors came to tell him to leave. God is about to destroy the city. Lot hesitates, and above the words of hesitation in the Torah, Vayamima, he says, a, a shliach appears. He is torn, conflicted. He senses that the visitors are right, and the city is indeed about to be destroyed. But he has invested his whole future in the new in his new identity, and he has been carving out for himself and his daughter. And had angels not seized him and take him to safety, he would have delayed until it was too late. He said the second occurs when Abraham asked his servant, traditionally identified as Eliezer, to find a wife for his son Isaac. He says the commentators suggest that Eliezer feels a profound ambivalence about his mission. Were Isaac not to marry and have child, Abraham's estate would eventually pass on to him or his descendants. He said, Abraham already said so before Isaac was born, Sovereign Lord, what can you give me since I remain childless, and one who will inherit my estate is Eliezer of Damascus. He says if Eliezer succeeded in his mission, bringing back a wife for Isaac, if he had done the couples, if he had it, and if he the couple has children, then his chances of one day acquiring Abraham's wealth would have disappeared completely. Two instincts, two instincts war within him: loyalty to his master and personal ambition. The verse states, and he said, the Lord and the God of my master Abraham sent me good speed this day and show kindness to my to my master Abraham. Loyalty wins, but not without deep struggle. And he says, the third brings us to Egypt, in the life of Joseph. He says, sold by his brothers as a slave, and now he's working in the house of an eminent Egyptian in Potiphar. Left alone in the house with his master's wife, he finds himself the object of desire, and he is handsome, and she wants him to sleep with her. He refuses to do such a thing. He says he would betray his master, her husband. It would be a sin against God, and yet whoever he refused is a shliat. Shashit. I don't know. I need to read this in Hebrew, so I can't understand English. He says, indicating as some rabbinical sources and medieval commentators suggest that he does so at the cost of considerable effort. He nearly succumbs. This is more than the usual conflict between sin and temptation. It is a conflict in reality. Recall that Joseph is now living and for him a new and strange life. And his brother has rejected him, and they made it clear that they did not want him as a part of the family. Why then should he not, as in Egypt, do as the Egyptians did? Why not yield to his master's wife and say, if that's what she wants? He said the question for Joseph is not just, is this right, but also, I am an Egyptian or am I a Jew? That's an interesting point. It's that idea of like who are you? Like who are you? Like what does it mean to be a human? Number one, right? And then what does it mean to be Israel? Right? And then how, when the different situations that come up in life, how do you deal with them? You deal with them as a Jew, or you deal with them as an Egyptian. He says all three episodes are about inner conflict, and all three are about identity. He says, and there are times when each of us has to decide not just what I shall do, but what kind of person shall I be. That is particularly faithful in the case of a leader, which brings us to episode 4 of this time about Moses. He says after the sin of the golden calf, Moses had at God's command instructed the Israelites to build a sanctuary, which would be in effect a permanent symbolic home of God in the midst of the people. He said the work is completed. He says all that remains for Moses to instruct his brother Aaron and his son to. He said the work is complete. All that remains for Moshe to instruct his brother Aaron and his son into office. His robes, Aaron with the special garments of the high priest, anointed him with oil and performed various sacrifices appropriate to the occasion over the word. It says Vaishhat in the slaughter. He said sacrificial arms, and he says by now we know that this means that there was an internal struggle in Moshe's mind. But what was it? He said it is not the slightest sign in the text that suggests that he is undergoing a crisis. Okay, so let's try to understand what's going on. He said, yet a moment through makes it clear what Moses' inner turmoil was about. Until now, he has led the Jewish people. Aaron, his brother, assisted him, accompanying him on his mission to Pharaoh, acting as his spokesperson, aide, and second in command. Now, however, Aaron is about to undertake a new leadership role in his own right. No longer will be in the shadow of Moshe, and he will do what Moshe cannot do himself. He will preside over the daily offerings in the tabernacle. He says he will meditate on the avoda and in the Israelites in the Israelites' scarce service to God, and once a year, he says, and once a year on Yom Kippur, he will perform the service that will secure anointment for the people from its sins. He says. He says from its sins and who no longer. He says from its sins and no longer in Moshe's shadow. Aaron is about to become one of the most about to become a one kind of leader, and Moses is not destined to be a high priest. He said the Talmud alludes to a further. Um, the Talmud adds a further dimension to the pro, the pro, the I don't know how this. You see this word? Was this ponancy? Poganagacy? Poganagacy?
Mm. Uh, Potency.
Potency?
Yeah, like
All
some.
right, post. Okay, I don't know. I don't know. All right, so he says to further add to the dimension to the potency of the moment. At the burning bush, Moses had repeatedly resisted God's call to lead the people. Eventually, God told him that Aaron would go with him, helping him to speak. The Talmud says that at the moment, Moses lost the chance to be the priest. Originally, God said, "I had intended for you, you would be the priest, and Aaron would, your brother would be the Levi, and now he will be the priest, and you will be the Levi." It says in so it says so it says that is Moses' inner struggle conveyed by the Shalashit, Shalashit, Shalishalet. And he says, and he's about to introduce his brother into the office he himself will never hold. Things might be have been otherwise, but his life is not lived in the world of might have been. He surely feels joy for his brother, but he cannot altogether avoid the sense of loss. Perhaps he's already sensed that what he will later discover through that he is the prophet and liberator, and Aaron will have the privilege and Aaron will have a privilege Moshe has desired, namely seeing his children and his descendants inherit this role. The son of a priest is a priest, and the priest of a prophet is rarely a prophet. So, anyways, I guess you're going into like Moshe's psychology, right? And they're trying to like kind of like understand like where he's at in his different stages of development, right? And they're talking about this idea of this transition, I guess I guess we have to see where he's going with. I don't want to. He says what we all well the things like this is also an interesting point. How does this relate to right now, right? Because it sounds like he's saying here that there's this big transition that's happening, right? There's a massive transition in power, a massive transition, right? Isn't that what Pesach is? It's Seder. It's like creating a new order. He said, "What all four stories tell us is that it comes a time in each of us where we must make an ultimate decision as to who we are." He says, "It is a moment of existential truth. Lot is a Hebrew, not a citizen of Sodom. Eliezer is Abraham's servant, not his heir. Joseph is Joseph is Jacob's son, not an Egyptian of loose morals. Moshe is a prophet, not a priest. To say yes to who we are, we have to have courage to say no to who we are not." He said that is the meaning of the Shalashit. Shalashit. So he says, and we must emerge less confident than we were before. He says this applies especially to leaders, which is why the case Moshe and Paro, I mean, that Moshe and his parsha is so important. These were the things Moshe was not destined to do. He was not to become a priest. That task fell to Aaron, and he would not lead to the crossing of the Jordan, But that was Joshua's role, or Yehoshua ben Nun. He says, Moshe had to accept both facts, that good grace that he was to be honest with himself. The great leader must be honest with themselves, and if they to be honest with those they lead. He said a leader should never try to be all things to all people. A leader should be content what he or she is. A leader must have strength to know what they cannot be, and if they are to have courage to be themselves. Thoughts, reflections.
Yeah, it's the conditions that we find ourselves in. Like I've seen it personally in my life. Like not necessarily myself. Well, kind of. I can put myself in a category, but people are in their conditions. They allow the conditions to dictate who they are, and it's like that's not the way it's supposed to be. You have the opportunity to rise above that. That's the purpose of it. That's the purpose of you being here is to draw out. Okay, you say you trying to work on your inner dimensions. All right, so you're gonna get put in a place of sadness or anger. It's not for that to define you. It's for you to overcome that, to rise above that. You're put in certain situations just to bring out what you truly are. Is Yosef Hazadik is now he's in Egypt. He has every reason to assimilate to the culture, to the society. He has, every how does he feel? His brothers have sold him. He's been brought up in the traditions of Hakadosh Baruch Hu, and now he's in the lowest place on earth. And he has from the outside looking in, he has every right. Every right to stray away from that. Obviously, that's not your path. It's not who you're supposed to be. Look where you are. But in reality, Hashem was putting him in that situation so he could bring out that he is Exotic. So he could continue the very traditions that he was brought up in. B'nai Israel and Mitzrayim, this horrible bondage. It's only bring out that light. How do you know if you can shine if you're not in darkness? So it's the condition. You get the opportunity to choose. You get the opportunity to see who you are, and you get the opportunity to choose who you want to be. And that's what I'm getting from this. Now the opportunity to choose. And the opportunity to accept that. Hey, Moshe Rabbeinu, it wasn't. He could have been the high priest. He was. I mean, you could say he was destined to be, but he chose otherwise. And I was like, okay, you have to accept that. And that acceptance isn't a diminishment of your greatness. It's actually an exaltation of your greatness. So I think it's what's some of your thoughts on it, Ralph?
Even though the parsha is not connected per se in subject matter to what's going on right now in terms of Pesach and the whole thing, but nevertheless, the energy that we get from this portion is transition, and we're seeing reordering, and the reordering of things may not be the way that I see it or why I understand. So Hashem gives us the ability to look at that experience at the highest of levels. Not like through simple people, trying to figure out, but no, people at the highest of levels, right? And the people at the highest of levels in this case is Moshe Rabbeinu. And so we're getting to see how Moshe Rabbeinu deals with this type of a conflict, right? The reorganization of things, losing what he feels is control or feeling a sense of, wanting to do more, but see himself being put in a particular position that God wants him to be in and accepting that. So I think that's the energy that's going on right now in the heavens. And I think that's the energy that's being expressed in the Parsha. And that's ultimately what we're going to experience, Seder night. Even if we think like, oh man, you got to have like this outer body experience. You don't have to have that. Just do the mitzvahs. Just do the mitzvahs of the Seder. You know what I'm saying? And, and by doing the mitzvahs of the Seder, by doing the mitzvahs of the Seder, the light's going to do the rest. And every year you get stronger and stronger. But it's not saying the light's different. It just means next year you have even a bigger vessel, right? Like this year you have a bigger vessel than you had last year, right? So it's all, but and you don't take in more than your soul needs at this point, right? Because you don't want to crash out. So all the things is like are there and are there to support us. So I'm gonna have another class tonight around like 20 o'clock. Does that work for you?
Yeah, that works.
All right. Yeah, so like 20 o'clock, we have to, keep pushing through the Haggadah. All right. Baruch atah Adonai, le'olam amen ve'amen.